Today, Josh will get into building an audience. So let's see. Josh is a creator of the popular For the Interested newsletter. I'll provide a link for that in the chat. Such a great newsletter. He reaches upwards of more than 25,000 readers each week. If you haven't seen it, really, you've got to check it out. He's also an audience growth strategist, say that 3 times fast, writer and entrepreneur. This recording, just so you know, is going to be available within 24 hours in the lab for you to go back, rewatch, share it with your friends. For links to resources, the agenda, and all the other things, please check out the FAQ resource that Maya has shared in the chat. And for Q&A, please make sure to put your question in the public chat. And I'm going to hold on to it until the end, and then we'll give them to Josh to answer at the end. And if you want to turn your camera on so that our presenter can see your faces, it's nice, but no pressure. You don't have to. So without further ado, we're welcoming back Josh Spector.
Hey guys, welcome back to those of you that are coming back. And if you're first timers here, thanks for coming. So today is going to be fun and tactical and about something everyone wants, which is to get more readers and grow their audience for their newsletter. So like I said, today we're going to talk about how to grow your newsletter. Just a quick recap. In the first session, I explained why every email marketing strategy should have a newsletter and the difference between the two. And just again, as a quick reminder, when I say newsletter, I mean a content-driven, consistent email that provides value to your audience, as opposed to sort of email marketing, which is more sales-driven typically. Then in the last session, obviously, we talked about how to figure out and come up with a topic and a format for your newsletter. So today I'm assuming that you've gone sort of down that road. And now we're going to talk about, once you have your newsletter, how do you get more people to actually read it? So I want to start with a couple of key audience concepts, and then we're going to go into some specific tactics. So the first one is, your audience probably isn't what you think it is. Most people think about their audience as the number of people who have consumed their creations or bought their products or that kind of thing. But I actually think it's about connection, that really your audience is the number of people you can count on to consume your next creation. So what that means, for example, audience size only matters if they're actually engaged with you, and more specifically, if they're connected with you. So having a large email list of people who don't open your emails is meaningless. I would consider your audience size to be the number of people that are regularly opening your emails, or that you're actually reaching and paying attention to what you send, not just the mass number that you have. You see this in all sorts of different content. So for example, if you have a video sort of go viral and you get 100,000 views, but none of those people subscribe to your channel or subscribe to your email list, they're not really in your audience. Like, I don't actually view that necessarily as a success. I would see that as 100,000 missed opportunities. And then with customer lists, the same thing. A huge customer list of email addresses doesn't matter if you're never emailing them and not developing a relationship with them. So the key takeaway here is, think about your audience size, not in terms of mass number, but in terms of how many people are actually paying attention, how many people are you actually reaching. And everything that we're going to do is going to be to optimize to grow that number, not the sort of general mass number. Successful newsletters and successful marketers know this already, and they optimize for it. So Morning Brew, which is obviously a hugely successful newsletter, they remove people frequently who aren't paying attention. So if you don't open an email within 18 days of signing up to their newsletter, they start to remove you. And when I say start to remove you, what I mean is they will send you some sort of re-engagement emails saying, hey, you haven't opened, and are you not interested anymore? And if you don't respond to those, eventually you're off their list pretty quickly. They do the same thing if you haven't engaged with one of their emails in 90 days. So this can be called sort of cleaning your list. It helps with deliverability. There's a lot of reasons to do it, but I think it's also important for you to understand that, people tend to look at that top line number of how big is my list, how many subscribers I have. but it doesn't really matter. What matters again is how many are opening, and you shouldn't be afraid to sort of run people off your list if they're not opening and not engaging. Another key audience concept, you actually have two audiences. You have your existing audience, which is people who already know or already connected to you, familiar with your brand, familiar with your products. Maybe they bought them, maybe they haven't, but they're at least aware of them. And then you have your potential audience, people who are not yet connected to you, don't know about you. These two audiences are in very different places and want different things. And a lot of times you'll see, especially with brands and businesses, that they're creating content in their newsletter that is only interesting or appealing to people who already know them, and then wondering why they're not getting any growth and getting any new people, right? So if nobody knows, if you're let's say you're a clothing manufacturer, and you've decided that in your emails and your newsletter, you're going to talk behind the scenes about how you create your clothing, that might be really interesting to your existing audience who knows you, but people who don't know you probably don't care. So that's not actually going to grow your audience. Now, there's a place for content for both of these audiences. It doesn't have to be one or the other. There are advantages to sort of giving behind the scenes or sort of inside jokes or communicating with your existing audience, but you really want to try to strike a balance, because again, the goal, and one of the reasons you're doing a newsletter, going back to sort of my first session, as opposed to just email marketing, is you want this to be a tool and an asset that brings new people into you. So if you're just talking about stuff that they don't know about and don't care about, that's not going to attract anyone. So just something to keep in mind as you're putting together your newsletter. So I want to zoom out for a second. This is the book Tribes by Seth Godin, which came out, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, is not technically a book about audience growth, but it is the book I recommend most often for audience growth. It's a short, quick, fantastic read, and I think it will, in many cases, change your perception about how audiences work and how they grow. The basic premise of the book is that there are tribes of people who are interested in specific things or have shared beliefs spread out all over the world and all over your community. And your job is not to grow and attract an audience to you. It's just to create opportunities for those people to connect with each other, right? So the concept is essentially that whereas a lot of people think what you're trying to do is, oh, I created this thing and now I need to try to get people to be interested in it and draw them to me. The truth is you just need to find the people that are already interested in that thing, create opportunities and say, hey, we're gathering over here. If you're interested in this, if you're this kind of person, we're over here, and look for ways to connect them. And when you do that, what you wind up doing is putting yourself at the center of that tribe, which is incredibly powerful. So this is a really different mindset shift from the way most people initially think about growing an audience, right? They think it's, I make a thing and I have to convince people to like my thing. Your audience, no matter what you do, is already out there. You just have to create the opportunity for them to gather and connect with each other. And by doing so, they will wind up connecting to you as well. There's a great quote in the book that explains this. He says, the Beatles didn't invent teenagers, they just showed up and led them, right? So that is a very different way of thinking about it. Everything that was going on amongst that community or that tribe, in this case, teenagers during that era, was already there. They were just looking for someone to rally around and to say, hey, people with these beliefs, we're over here. So that can be really helpful as you sort of think about your newsletter and your audience, and that it's not, oh, I'm trying to get people to like my thing. It's, I'm trying to connect people who are already interested in these things. Another concept to keep in mind: audience versus ideal audience. For this one, I use a dartboard analogy. So a lot of people push back against the concept of niching down and getting sort of specific. And the reason they do that is they're worried that it will exclude other people who may like what they do. But the truth is, I like this dartboard analogy because you get the most points by aiming at the bullseye, which is the smallest, if you think about it in terms of niche, the smallest, most specific niche. But when you throw darts, you're still going to get points. For some of them are going to land outside the bullseye, and you're still going to get points. So when I think about it, when I think about niche, what I'm really talking about is ideal audience. Who are the people most likely to enjoy what you do? Who you would most like to serve? Who you could best serve? And you focus very specifically on that, and don't worry about excluding others, because what will happen is you'll be a home run and a perfect fit for those specific people, but you're still going to get others, right? So I'll use an example of let's say that I think I used this example before, but let's say you have a clothing brand that's aimed at city urban skateboard types, right? By aiming specifically for that, city urban skateboard types are going to love it. But there still may be people in the suburbs who still buy the clothes and still like it because they associate with that lifestyle, right? Versus just going, oh, we're a generic skateboard clothing company, right? You want to get specific, aim for the bullseye, and not worry about excluding others, because you're still gonna get some of them. But you want to be a perfect fit. You want to be for someone, not for everyone. In thinking about this, three key questions that will help you sort of hone in on this. The first one is obvious, and a lot of people think about it. Who's it for, right? Who's my newsletter for? Who's my brand? Who's my product for? The second one, a lot fewer people think about, and it might actually be more important. Who's it not for? You want to draw a line in the sand with your newsletter, your brand. And again, some of this is a general marketing principle, but there's certainly overlap. You don't want to be creating a newsletter that's for everyone. You want to create a newsletter that's for someone specific. One of the ways to hone in on this is a good exercise is to pick 3 traits that your ideal audience would have. Again, I'm using the term ideal, not only. It doesn't mean that these are the only people who will like your newsletter or what you do. It just means that they're the ones, again, that you would most want to be connected to, or who would likely get the most value out of what you do. That when you pick those 3 traits, the audience, the person doesn't have to have all 3. They could have any one of the 3. I'll give you an example. So for myself, my target audience is creators and entrepreneurs who want to grow their audience and business. The 3 sort of ideal traits I picked is people that use writing, newsletters, or Twitter to do so. I can help YouTubers, I can help podcasters, I can help small business owners, I can help a variety of people that don't use those 3 things. And I have a lot of those people in my audience. But my ideal audience, because so much of what I do is based in writing and not video or podcast or that kind of thing, my ideal audience is people that use writing, Twitter, or newsletter. So that's an example of how you can approach your thing and go, what are the 3 traits that I would most want to help, or would most benefit from my help? One other concept here, it's really important. If you want to grow your audience, growth requires retention. So if your newsletter, and let me preface this by saying, anytime you send an email, no matter how good your newsletter is, some people are going to subscribe. So don't panic if people are subscribing. It's part of it. The bigger your list is, the more people are going to subscribe every time. I lose probably 1,000 subscribers a month, or 1,000 people unsubscribe a month. I gain over 1,000 a month, so I'm still growing. And I have a very successful newsletter. So the more you have, the more are going to unsubscribe. Not that that's fun, but you should not be upset by that. Again, you're building for someone, not everyone. And if they unsubscribe, all it really means is it wasn't for them. Doesn't mean it's not good, just means it's not for them, right? And all you should really care about is the people that are sticking around. More people are sticking around than are leaving. So don't beat yourself up and obsess over you send an email and 20, let's say you send an email to 1,000 people and 20 people unsubscribe. Well, you might feel really bad, but the truth is, 980 didn't unsubscribe. So don't lose sight of that. But with that said, when you are getting unsubscribes, again, in order to grow, you have to be retaining people, right? The more you lose, the tougher it is to grow. So just to give you some context, if you had a 1,000 subscriber weekly newsletter, and every time you send it, 5% leave, you're going to need to attract 50 new subscribers a week just to break even, just to stay at 1,000, right? So you can see how, you can imagine if you were losing 20% every time you sent an email, it's going to be really hard for you to grow. Not impossible, just hard. Again, you're going to lose people, but it's something to keep in mind that if your newsletter is losing a lot of people regularly, then you probably want to focus on how do you make that better? How do you get people to stay before worrying too much about how you get new people? Okay. So with those concepts in mind, let's move on, and I'll share some specific tactics that you can use to grow your audience. So the first thing is, first I want to talk about how to grow your existing audience, and then we'll get into how to bring in new people. So the first thing you want to do is you want to think about, like, what is your existing audience, not necessarily, what email addresses do you have? If you have email marketing lists, if you have customer lists that maybe you've never emailed before, sort of gather whatever email addresses you have, and along those lines, start to think about touch points you have with customers where you can get email addresses, right? Whether that be if you have a store and they're buying in person, whether it be clients, potential clients, people who have read blog posts or video content, any of that kind of stuff. You want to identify all your touch points, and you want to make sure that at those touch points, you are telling people about your newsletter, you are inviting them to join it, and you are explaining to them and giving them a reason to do so, right? So, for example, and you can get creative with that, right? Let's say you owned a gardening store. When every customer is buying, here's what happens too often is they go, "Oh, do you want to join our mailing list?" And most people are like, "No, I don't," right? It's very different to go, "Hey, every 2 weeks we send an email with tips on how to improve your garden. Would you like to check it out? Or would you like to check out the next one?" Right? You want to frame what you're offering as valuable and interesting and make it easy for them to say yes. It's not just mention it. "Oh, we have a newsletter. Would you like to get it?" Like, that's really different than saying, "Hey, here's what the value is that you're going to get out of it." The other thing is social followers. If you're doing something on social media, which I assume most of you are, lots of people think about how they grow their social followers, and they don't think about how you convert your social followers into email subscribers, which is way more valuable. I would also add, let's say you use multiple social channels. Once you have someone's email address, it's easy to get them to then follow you on various social channels, right? So people sort of invert it. It's like once you get that email address, you can get to them to get them to do all sorts of stuff, right? Let's say someone follows you on Instagram and you get them to join your email list, and you want them to follow you on LinkedIn. Well, your next newsletter, you could include, "Oh, come answer this question that we referenced on LinkedIn." Like, you could drive them straight to that content. You're not really going to do that on Instagram, right? You're not going to post and say, "Hey, go to LinkedIn and answer this question." You could, but it's not the same. To convert social followers into newsletter subscribers, the most important thing you can do is include a call to action in your bio. Give people a clear reason to give you their email address, and use your bio link to link directly to your newsletter sign up page. Make it clear what you want them to do, make it clear what the value is. So this is my Twitter profile. The bio obviously says, "I help you produce, promote, and profit from your creations. Subscribe to my newsletter below for free personalized recommendations. Get it here," link straight to the sign up page, right? Most people, again, don't do this. Their bio says, "Oh, we're a gardening company, we're a logo design company, I'm a marketing consultant," and then the link is just to the homepage of their website, which is fine, but that's not going to get you nearly as many subscribers as actually making the call to action to do so. Survey your audience. This I've done for my newsletter in the early days. It was incredibly eye-opening and very helpful. It's also helpful in general for your brand, your marketing. I recommend a really simple 3-question survey. Don't use multiple choice. Leave it open-ended, because you want to see the words that your audience uses so that you can then repurpose those words into your marketing materials, into your sign-up page. These are the 3 questions I asked. They worked really well. I'll do it for newsletter, but again, this is something you could do for your brand or business in general. But in one word, how does my newsletter make you feel? Obviously, this would be to people who have already been reading it for a little bit. You wouldn't do this after sending one issue. In one sentence, what are your favorite newsletter articles that I share about? And what's your favorite newsletter other than this one? So the first question is going to give you a very clear emotional trigger that people use. So for me, for example, I would talk about my newsletter very feature driven. So I would say, the newsletter helps people produce, promote, and profit from their creations. And when I asked this question, again, it was open ended, it was not multiple choice, but I had, I think, almost 20 people, the word they chose was inspired. And I was not talking about the inspirational value of my newsletter at all in anything that I did. So that was really opening, that it was like, wow, 20 people randomly chose the exact same word. And it's a word I don't even use when talking about my newsletter. Like, that's a missed opportunity. Uh, in one sentence, what are your favorite articles about? Obviously, this gives you a sense, sort of separate from just the click stats, of what people actually want from your newsletter and what's resonating with them the most. And then what's your favorite newsletter other than this one is really helpful, because number one, from a marketing standpoint, it might tip you off that, like, oh, a lot of people who like this newsletter also like mine. I should go find that audience, whether you're going to do that with paid ads or cross promotions or any of that stuff. One thing to keep in mind with that question is the answers you get to that will be influenced a bit based on how large the newsletter is. So, for example, if James Clear has millions of subscribers, you're likely going to get more people to say they like James Clear's newsletter than some other newsletter that has 500 subscribers. So take that with a grain of salt, especially when it comes to sort of bigger newsletters. But it is helpful and can be helpful in terms of sort of getting a sense of where your audience is. This is another tactic that I always recommend. It's one of the first things I recommend to anyone that wants to grow their newsletters. It works in basically any niche in any industry, and it is very effective. I call it a recommended newsletter post. So what you want to do is you want to come up with, and by the way, you could also do this with podcasts or video channels or anything. You want to create a piece of content that essentially recommends ideally 10 or more newsletters in your niche or space, right? Make yours one of them. You can't see this in the excerpt I pulled, but my newsletter is in here, and make a nod to it. Say like, oh, I might be biased, but I think this one's really helpful as well. So what happens here is, once you create this post, you can then turn it into social posts and tag all these people as well. You can reach out to all these newsletters and let them know, hey, I featured you in this list. Many of them will then share it. And so it is a great way to sort of drive people to you. In this case, I highlighted 39 creativity newsletters. If a third of those then mentioned and linked to this in their newsletter, you're reaching a lot of people for free. Plus, you're developing relationships and all of that. Super effective. And again, you can apply it to basically any niche, any industry, anything you're doing. And I do it with, what I like about doing it with newsletters is anyone that's going to read this is interested in these kind of newsletters. So it is a 100% target fit. These are the kind of people that are going to subscribe. You're not reading a post about creativity newsletters worth reading if you're not the kind of person that subscribes to creativity newsletters. So the audience you attract for it is hyper targeted. This also, if you were going to do paid promotion in terms of a Facebook ad or something else, good piece of content to do it for, because again, anyone that's clicking and reading is actively looking for newsletters like this to subscribe to. Really effective tactic. Another tactic here, share when you do write your newsletter, share it on social before you publish it. Give people a reason to subscribe. What most people do is they publish their newsletter and then they share it after it comes out, which is fine. I'm not saying not to do that. But when you do that, you haven't really given people a reason to subscribe, because they might subscribe if they read it and like it, but there's not the same sense of urgency. So I promote my newsletter before I send it with something like this. I tease it basically. Here's what's headed to your inbox. not yet subscribed and want to get it. And then I show them what's actually going to be in the newsletter. So as you can imagine, this always gets subscribers because people see that and they go, oh, I really want to read that thing about how to manage your time like a computer does. So I'm going to sign up, versus the promo afterwards. They would just click and read it, and maybe they subscribe, maybe they don't. So I recommend definitely promoting it before you publish, teasing it like this. And you can also promote it afterwards. But that is helpful. A quick rant about lead magnets. So for those of you that don't know what a lead magnet is, it's basically a piece of sort of content or something you come up with that people can only access if they give you their email address. It is a super common marketing tactic. It can be effective. I'm not going to lie; it will get you more email addresses. However, it's not. I don't actually recommend doing it, and the reason I don't recommend doing it is because what I think especially in the context of a newsletter, I like a lead magnet for email marketing, where you're just going to get an email and then send them marketing messages. I don't like it for a newsletter, because what you get is you get emails from people who just want the lead magnet. They don't want the newsletter. So it's kind of fool's gold. You feel like, oh, look, this is really working. I'm getting all these email addresses. And then they all unsubscribe or don't open the newsletter, or they gave you a sort of alternate email address just to get the lead magnet. So you feel like it's working, but it's actually not. My other take on lead magnets is, if you have, the whole point of it is to create a piece of content that is so valuable that people will want to give you their email address to get it. If you have actually created a piece of content that is that valuable, you should not want to limit the number of people who see it. You should want as many people as possible to see it. And you should incorporate into it plugs for your newsletter. So if your content or your lead magnet is really good, put it out for free, get as many people as possible to see it. And when they're blown away and go, oh my God, this was amazing, they're going to want to sign up for your newsletter. And when they sign up for your newsletter, they're going to, again, they signed up for the newsletter. So they're going to stick around. They're going to be a more valuable subscriber. And the other thing is, your reach is going to be way bigger, because this great piece of free content they're going to share, they're going to tell others about, they're going to drive more people to you. So you're going to come out way ahead, as opposed to hiding it, where when you hide it and request an email address, number one, most of the emails you get, they didn't want the newsletter, they wanted the lead magnet. Number two, how many people were curious but not curious enough to give you their email address? Whereas had they actually seen the great piece of content, they then would have subscribed. So I strongly recommend, I like the idea of creating a lead magnet type piece of content, but I would not use it as a lead magnet and require an email address. I would try to get as many people as possible to see it and share it. Paid growth is a whole other thing. We could do 4 sessions probably just on paid growth, and maybe at some point we will. But at a very high level, if you're going to spend money to grow your newsletter, these are the 3 things that I would consider spending it on. First, and probably most effective and cost effective, if it fits in your niche, is newsletter ads. If you can find newsletters that have an audience that is relevant to your people, they're incredibly effective. They reach an audience of people who are already subscribing to newsletters. They can be a great investment. Now, not everyone can find newsletters that fit their niche, but if you can find it, I strongly recommend it. To give you an idea, for example, I sell ads in my newsletter. It's $100, and for $100, you reach my audience of about 20,000 creators and entrepreneurs. And you get 1 ad in the Sunday edition, which is, I run 5 ads in that edition. And then you also are the sole sponsor of a weekday edition, and you're the only sponsor of that the following week. On average, the people that buy my ads get 150 clicks. I've had people get over 100 subscribers when they promote their newsletter. So 100 subscribers for $100 is, again, not that you're always going to get that, but in general, it's very effective if you're a fit. And I'm mentioning my newsletter because obviously I have the most insight into that, but I've run ads in other people's newsletters, and it's almost always very cost effective. Separate from that, Facebook and Instagram ads obviously can be very effective. You can get hyper targeted. You can scale almost endlessly. My one advice if you're going to do Facebook and Instagram ads is a lot of times what most people do is they run ads basically to a sign up page. And I have found in my own experience that you're better off promoting a piece of content with plugs for the ads or plugs for your newsletter within it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is if you run an ad to a newsletter and people have no idea who you are, they haven't read your content, that's a bit of a jump. Some people may subscribe, but it's sort of a big leap to go through to get them to give you your email address without any context of who you are. But if you drive them to content, they see it, they're like, oh, this is really valuable. They're more likely to convert. But the bigger thing is nobody's ever going to share a Facebook or Instagram ad to a newsletter sign up page, but they will share content. So this is kind of similar to the lead magnet piece that if you're running an ad driving to a good piece of relevant content, you're going to get a lot of sharing of that, and all of that organic free traffic is going to drastically reduce how much it costs you per subscriber. So that's another reason why if you're going to do Facebook ads, I like promoting content instead of sign up page. The third one is referral programs. These are easy ways that you can, if you have an existing audience, you can incentivize them to share and spread the word. You can give them rewards based on how many people they get to sign up. I recommend SparkLoop to power that. It's a software that makes it easy. It assigns a sort of unique ID to every one of your subscribers, and then it tracks all of how many subscriptions they get, and you can just assign rewards and do it from there. Referral programs can be effective. They can be a little hit or miss. It depends on your niche. It depends on your audience. I probably wouldn't bother doing it until you have at least a couple thousand subscribers. If your audience is too small, it might not be worth the effort, but you can experiment with it. And then finally, just a couple quick sort of don't forget things that are obvious but maybe not obvious. One, make sure your sign up page is mobile friendly. People will access it there. I'm amazed sometimes that people are promoting their newsletter and then I'm on my phone and I go to it and I can't even see the sign up form or it's all jumbled. Social proof on your sign up page can be really helpful. And by the way, we're going to do a deeper dive in sign up pages on the next session. But social proof can be really helpful. A couple testimonials for people talking about, how great or how valuable your newsletter is. Another version of social proof, if you don't have the sort of testimonial quotes, depending on what your newsletter is, especially if it's in the sort of business space, people from these kinds of companies subscribe, that can say something, people that work at Google and Microsoft and whatever. This is a really simple one that lots of people screw up. Don't call it a mailing list. Nobody wants to join a mailing list. They just think that you're going to pester them. That doesn't sound like something that's valuable to them. Always call it a newsletter or resource or something that sounds valuable, never a mailing list. And then the other thing is just keep in mind, besides your sign up page, which again, we'll get into next week or on Thursday, there are what I call sort of secondary sign up pages and opportunities everywhere. Your about page is a big one. If someone's reading your about page, there should be a plug for your newsletter in it. Blog posts should include a plug for your newsletter, not just in the footer or in the sidebar, actually in the text of the blog post. I recommend within the first 3 to 5 paragraphs having a reference to your newsletter that's made relevant to whatever the topic of the newsletter is. So for example, if I was writing, let's say I wrote a blog post about what to tweet, I might in that third paragraph in parentheses after something just say, oh, and by the way, if you're interested in learning more about how to master Twitter, you'll love my newsletter or check out this, right? Those are you don't want to, what a lot of people do is their sign up form is just at the bottom of their blog post or it's in the sidebar. And, that's only going to get in front of people who read the whole thing and continue to scroll down, right? So if you put a reference in the text higher up, they're going to at least see it, which is going to get you more subscribers. And then YouTube descriptions, again, like little, just simple places, anywhere people are consuming any of your stuff, you want to have a plug for the newsletter because it's really, going back to sort of the beginning of what I was talking about, it's the engine of a lot of your becomes the engine of a lot of your marketing and your connection to your audience. And then most importantly, click send. People get bogged down forever trying to perfect things and trying to figure out what to do next. At the end of the day, publish your newsletter, publish it consistently. You can optimize and figure out the rest as you go. Don't get bogged down in all this other stuff. Just start publishing it and getting better at it. And assuming it's good, it will spread, and you will grow over time. Even if you didn't do any of the other stuff, as long as you write something good and publish it regularly, it will drive some word of mouth. So I know that's a lot. Hopefully that's helpful. Any questions?
I have a question, Josh.
Yes.
You brought up the Morning Brew, and I recently started reading that just a few weeks ago. And I feel like now the Morning Brew wants me to work for them to build their audience. I don't know if it's on some kind of set pattern, but this morning I got an email from them saying, if you send this link to your friends,
Yeah.
and they sign up, for every sign up on this pattern, we're going to send you some swag.
Yeah.
So I feel like now they're using me to build their audience for them. So I don't know if that's a good thing to do or a bad thing to do, or
So they had a lot of success with the referral program early on. So it's a piece of what they do, and they also have a massive audience. So again, they don't need that many people to do it for it to be sort of beneficial. I personally, while I do think referral programs can work, I experimented with one once or twice and ultimately sort of backburnered it. I do think they're probably, again, who am I to say they've had a lot of success, but in my opinion, they're a little overly aggressive with it. I share it because it is a tactic that certainly can work. It is not one, while I tried it, it is not one that I have done regularly or really stuck with. So I think it's case by case basis. And I think it depends on sort of your audience and who it is and what they want. The other thing I will say, and I've talked closely with the guys that run SparkLoop, who are great, and it is a great software and it is super helpful. And one of the things they said to me was, a lot of times people try this referral stuff with, oh, you can win a coffee mug and you can win a t-shirt and the sort of merchandise prizes. And that typically those don't work all that well. That your prizes, again, it depends on what your audience is, but it could be, figuring out what your audience really wants. In most cases, they don't want a t-shirt with the newsletter name on it, right? They want some sort of, it all depends what you offer. But I think, I would approach it that way, right? So if you're a consultant, maybe it's a free coaching call, or it's, something that people would be more, it really has to be something they want to motivate them. And I think that's part of it too, right? You're feeling like, okay, they're bombarding me with this referral stuff. I don't care about getting a coffee mug, right? But if they said to you, I'll just flip it around, right? If they said, we'll give you a free ad in Morning Brew, that might be more valuable, right? So I think a lot of it has to do with what the reward is, really drives the action or not, and probably your audience is how your audience feels about it.
okay. I'm not going to use my referral link just
Yeah.
and make them work for it. And I had one other question, if it's all right,
Yeah.
if I ask another thing. So you talk about the Facebook ads, and if anyone else is like me, my feed is now nothing but ads. I mean, are
Yeah.
Facebook ads really still that effective as they were back in the day? Because now it seems that I can't get. I'm like scrolling to find my friend's information.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're as effective as they once were. Again, it's a little bit case by case. I do think their targeting is really powerful. And so it all sort of depends, right? Like if you have a specific niche and the ability to get in front of specific people, the problem with seeing all the ads in your feed really is that you feel like they're not relevant or interesting, right? So if you were I'll give you an example, right? So if I have if I wrote something about how to get life coaching clients, and I'm able to show it to specifically people whose job title is life coach, it's relevant, right? And it's free, right? And I'm not giving, I think this is the other difference, right? Most of the ads you see are probably going straight for the ask. They're not content driven, right? There's a big difference between you, like, let's say you're a life coach and there's an article, I'm not selling anything, right? I'm not even saying sign up to my newsletter. I'm just saying, hey, here's an article about how to get life coach clients. And you're a life coach and you go, okay, I'm going to click that. And the article's actually good, right? It all goes back to like, it has to be good, right? The article's actually good and valuable. That's a very different experience than the ads that say, buy my training program, give me your email address to get this, that, or the other. It's the difference. It's funny. It almost in some ways mirrors what I was saying initially about newsletters providing value. I'm suggesting run ads that provide value as opposed to ads that are trying to immediately extract value.
I got
But
it.
yes, it's Facebook is, again, and that's the same thing. Another one. A few years ago, I ran a lot of Facebook ads in the early days of my newsletter. It helped me grow. It was very effective. I don't do it anymore for all sorts of reasons. Facebook is what Facebook is. But yes, it can work.
I got it. Okay, that's good to know. Oh, okay. So I have a question
Mhm.
from Tab. Says, I work with a group who disagree on the design of a newsletter. I praise for a design as simple as possible, something that looks like a regular email sent from friend to friend. Others say it must be branded with images, logo, even videos. Do you have any thoughts on?
Yes. So my instinctive reaction is I would side with that person. I like simpler, better. But that said, I would start with like, what are the goals? What are you really trying to accomplish? And which of the two designs is going to better accomplish that? I think that's a conversation to have. I think a lot of times people get bogged down in how it looks, as opposed to taking a step back and going, we're trying to accomplish A, B, and C. Which of these is going to do that better? And then the other thing, one of the great things is you can split test it. You can try it. You can go, hey, let's send two different versions, or for a month, let's do this design, and for a month, let's do that design. And then let's see what works. But again, you have to judge what worked based on your goals, right? What are you actually trying to accomplish? Because work can be, what does it mean? And I think that's a good conversation for anyone to have with any newsletter, right? What does it mean for this to work? Right? What does it mean for my newsletter to be successful? And that all depends, right? For some people, they might go, this newsletter works if it's growing our audience. But other people might go, this newsletter works if it's getting me 2 new clients a month, right? So those are very different, and you need to be clear on what you're trying to accomplish. And again, I'll just use that as an example, right? So let's say I have no idea what that business is, but let's say that business, their goal is we want to get more clients, right? Maybe the well-designed one, and I'm just making this up, but they might go, the well-designed one got us 10, subscribers grew 10%. The the simpler design didn't get us new subscribers, but the simpler design got us clients. So which one worked? If the goal is getting clients, the other one worked, right? And so I think in order to judge it, you need to first go, you need to define success and then judge it that way, and not be afraid to test it and see what happens.
Good advice, I think. It says thank you.
Oh,
Did anyone have a question? LaDonna, did you have a question? You did.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Those were great questions, by the way. I've made a lot of notes just from those. So my question is, I took a look at your newsletter, your website newsletter,
yes.
Josh, and I had asked about doing a blog last week, and your newsletter, it says that it's a newsletter,
Mhm.
but in terms of formatting, it looks like a blog to me. So
Mhm.
now I'm confused. Like, what is the difference between a blog and the newsletter style that you're teaching us?
Uh, well, that's a little bit of a tricky question, but I think so. The short answer is there doesn't have to be much difference. Let me back up a second. I think that, let's say you just had a blog, right? If you just had a blog, I would tell you, why do you not also have a newsletter? Because why wouldn't you want to be emailing people to get it? Even if you didn't create a separate product, right? If you
Okay.
just had a blog. Now, let's say you just had a newsletter. I would say, why are you not also publishing this on your website so it can be found in search and people can see it through the archives,
Okay. Got
right? So the short answer is I view blog versus newsletter as delivery mechanism. And if you're doing either, you should have both because it's as simple as a copy and paste. Now, if you choose to have the newsletter be different, you certainly can. But you see what I'm saying? Like to me,
Right.
it's like if you have like and by the way, I actually think, and I even go a step further, because I think email is the best connection you can have. It's algorithm. There is no algorithm. Like it's the most reliable way you can reach people. I think even if you had no website and we're just doing social posts, like people that are just using Instagram, I don't understand why you wouldn't also have a newsletter where once a week, even if you just emailed links and go, hey, here's the 5 things I posted on Instagram this week. Because to me, it's all about trying to reach people. And when you're just doing social platforms, you're already creating the content, but you're just saying, okay, well, Instagram will show this to whoever they want, as opposed to taking control of your audience. So they can be the same. They
Okay.
can be different, but I to me, it's you would have if you're doing either, you would have both, if that makes sense.
Okay, that does make sense, especially the way you kind of compared the two together and how they would be used.
Yeah.
Um, right. I think I would just go ahead and start with the newsletter. I've always struggled with the idea of trying to do a blog, but the way you've explained the newsletter, like I can see that. That makes sense to me. So then,
Here's how I would. Here's the other way I would think about it. Forget all the terms, right? Forget blog, social media, newsletter, right? And even content, right? People get bogged down in like, oh, I have to, all you're trying to do is create specific value for a specific audience.
right.
Everything else is a delivery mechanism,
Okay.
right? So you go, I'm going to create this thing, whatever it is, right? It could be written, could be video. You decide however you want to do it, right? This thing that provides this value to these people. Now, how do I want to deliver it to them? I want to email them. Oh, it's a newsletter. I want to have it on my website so people can see it. Oh, it's a blog, right? Like people get bogged down in like, oh, what these things are. And I just think that they're distribution channels, they're delivery mechanisms, right? And they can be whatever you want. That's why even with me, right? I have newsletters, I have weekday newsletters that are 1 sentence.
Wow.
And then I have weekend newsletters that are much longer, So if you would look at the like, let's say a Tuesday newsletter that I sent, quote unquote newsletter, that was 1 sentence, you wouldn't go, this feels like a blog post.
No.
But you might go, this feels like a tweet.
Okay.
Right? You know what I mean? So it's just create value
and then distribute it.
and not get bogged down on what the format has to be.
Okay, excellent. So then I have one more question about the Facebook posting or the ads.
Yeah.
You so for the Facebook ad, you've said the ad should deliver value, not just go for the ask.
Mhm.
So in the newsletter ad, would you say the same thing? The ad should deliver value.
Well, maybe not. So here's the big difference, right? On Facebook, there's built-in sharing.
Okay.
A newsletter, less so. A newsletter ad, right? So if I run an ad in a newsletter, yes, theoretically, you might click through to the article and you might share that, but it's not like Facebook where things can really sort of, quote unquote, go viral. So in a newsletter ad, I think I would experiment. The truth is I would experiment, right? So let's say you found some newsletter about the travel industry or something that fit perfectly, right? You might go, all right, I'm going to buy 2 ads. And one I'm going to drive to my sign up page and one I'm going to drive to a piece of content. And I'm going to measure, let's see what happens.
Okay.
Right. Also in that case, it might be 2 different ways to reach the same audience. Some people might click the, ad and some might be more interested in the content and I would experiment on Facebook too, right? Because it may be, people really are converting and just signing up right away. So you'd want to test it. But in general, I think about it different because Facebook is so just click the one thing to share it with everybody. So there's a little more upside there. People are less likely to share from a newsletter, but I would test it.
So in a newsletter, since that's specifically in terms of getting an ad, since that is, you're kind of saying, hey, your audience is the audience I'm looking for.
Yep.
And so for that, since it's the same audience, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same industry if it's the same audience. Maybe you're just
Correct.
catching them in a different interest
Right.
channel.
So let me give you a perfect example, right? So I think when we talked last time, we were talking about like a fluent adventurer, that kind of thing, right?
Right.
So you might find some travel newsletters and be like, let's try this. But you might also, as an experiment, find some like investment newsletters because
Right.
you're reaching the affluent part and go,
Right.
all right, I'm reaching a bunch of people that have money. Let's see how this does. So, right. So, to your point, it doesn't have to be your niche, it has to be your people,
Okay.
potentially.
And then the content of the ad within the scope of that
Mhm.
newsletter, it shouldn't be like, it should kind of match that same content
Yep.
feel and style, right? It shouldn't
Yeah.
be
So,
like,
so let's use that example, right? So, your
okay,
ad in the travel one, you're talking to people that are interested in travel, right?
right,
So your ad, I'm completely riffing here, but it might be something like, tired of the same old boring vacations, looking for a new adventure, check out this, right?
right,
Your
right.
ad in the investment newsletter might be, you made a ton of money this year. When you like to spend some of it to treat yourself to a once in a lifetime experience, check this out, right? I'm
Okay,
playing to the money angle, I'm playing to the sort of adventure travel angle. So, yes,
okay.
you would not run the same ad both. You would sort of cater to whoever you're speaking to.
So stay in context.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Josh. I
Welcome.
appreciate the
You're
time.
welcome.
Thank you.
Great. Those were really great questions.
Yeah.
So I think we don't have any more and we're about at the end of our time. So I'm going to thank you, Josh, again for another great session. And a copy of this recording is going to be available in the lab within 24 hours. If you want a copy of anything in the chat, make sure you get it before you leave because it goes away when we shut the thing down. Our next session is on Thursday, December 16th. And Josh is going to get into optimization and analysis. So don't forget to register or to come back because we want to see you here again. Go over to the DM Engage group. You can talk about it, tell everyone there what they missed out on and how they should be here on Thursday. So we will see you on Thursday. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, guys.